The day my mother told 300 people that my marriage was a mistake, my stepdaughter was sitting beside me in the third pew of Grace Fellowship Church, swinging her patent leather shoes against the kneeler and trying very hard to be still. Lily was 7 years old. She had insisted on braiding her own hair that morning, which meant the left side was slightly tighter than the right, and she had asked me 4 times on the drive over whether she looked pretty enough. I told her she looked perfect each time. Because she did. She didn't understand what my mother was saying at the pulpit. She just noticed that the room had gone quiet in a way it usually doesn't go quiet in church, a careful, held-breath silence, the kind that happens when something is wrong and no one is quite sure who is supposed to fix it. I understood every word. And so did 11 million people. Because what my family didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask about, had dismissed without curiosity or interest, was that Grace Fellowship's brand new livestream system, installed 3 weeks earlier and announced in the bulletin with modest pride, was running. And the audience my mother assumed was 300 familiar faces in her congregation was actually the 2 million strangers who followed a channel called A Table for Three. My channel. The channel my mother called that little video thing Nora does. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the thing about a public unraveling is that it never starts in public. It starts quietly. It starts in kitchens and Sunday dinners and whispered phone calls where something is said and no one acknowledges it because acknowledging it would require everyone to be honest, and honesty was not the language my family spoke. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. I met Daniel Holt on a Wednesday in October, 3 years ago. Not at a bar. Not through an app. At a grief support group in the basement of a Lutheran church 2 miles from my apartment, the kind of room with folding chairs in a circle and burnt coffee and carpet that smells like someone else's sadness. I was there because of my brother Marcus. He had died 8 months earlier at a construction site, an accident, 29 years old, gone in the time it takes to look the wrong way. I had handled his death the way I handle most things that are too large to feel, by working. By filming. By staying relentlessly busy until busy stopped being enough. Daniel was there because of Claire. His wife had died 11 months before that Wednesday. A brain aneurysm on a Tuesday afternoon while she was making grilled cheese sandwiches for their daughter. Lily was 5. She had come into the kitchen and found her mother on the floor. She'd waited 4 minutes before she understood what to do, and then she had called 911 and told the operator, very carefully, that her mom had fallen down and wouldn't wake up. I learned this later. Not from Daniel directly, but from Lily herself, who told me the whole story at the kitchen table one Saturday morning with the particular matter-of-fact honesty that children sometimes have about the worst things that have ever happened to them. She described it the way you'd describe a weather event, something large and outside your control that you had simply survived. I didn't fall for Daniel immediately. I want to be clear about that, because the story my mother eventually told implied that I had inserted myself into a grieving man's life and positioned myself as a replacement. That is not what happened. What happened was slower and more ordinary than that. We talked after the meeting that first Wednesday. Then again the next. Then we started getting coffee afterward at a diner 2 blocks away, just the 2 of us, because we were both still at the stage where you need someone who doesn't feel sorry for you, someone who already knows what it feels like from the inside. I met Lily 3 months into knowing Daniel. She was 6 years old and suspicious of me in the way only children can be, openly, without apology. She watched me from across the room for 20 full minutes when I came to pick Daniel up for dinner, studying me with an accuracy that made me feel I was being evaluated by someone far older than 6. Then she walked over, pressed her forehead against my arm, and said, "Your hair smells like flowers." After that, she was mine. Or I was hers. I'm still not entirely sure which direction that went. Daniel and I married 18 months later. A small ceremony, 40 guests, a backyard, string lights, a cake my friend Donna baked from a YouTube tutorial that leaned slightly to the left and was the best thing I've ever eaten. Lily was our flower girl. She wore yellow, the color her mother had loved, and she took that role with the gravity of someone performing an official duty. We were happy. We are happy. I want to say that plainly before I tell you everything else. My mother was not happy. My mother, Patricia Ferris, 62, founder of the Women's Ministry at Grace Fellowship, organizer of 3 charity auctions a year, a woman whose name appears on the commemorative brick outside the church entrance, had very specific ideas about what my life was supposed to look like. A widower with a grieving 7-year-old was not part of those ideas. She had told me this before the wedding. On the phone, in the careful, warm tone she reserves for verdicts she wants to pass off as concern. Nora, I just worry that you're taking on someone else's story. That little girl has a mother. You can't replace her. And that man, whatever he says now, he's still in love with a woman who isn't here. I know that, Mom. Do you? Because a grieving man is not a husband. He's a project. I had ended the call and sat very still for a long time, not crying, just sitting in the specific quiet that comes when someone you love says something that reveals, precisely and without ambiguity, who they actually are. My sister Becca had married Marcus Okafor 2 years earlier. Marcus was the son of Emmanuel Okafor, who owned 9 commercial properties in the city and had recently broken ground on a luxury residential development that the local newspaper covered 3 times. Marcus was an attorney. He wore custom shirts. He had never, as far as anyone in our family was aware, experienced a single difficulty in his 39 years of life. My mother loved Marcus. She used his full name when she mentioned him, the way people do with titles. She told me twice that Becca had done it right, found someone solid, someone who came without complications. I was the one who came with complications. At my wedding, which my parents attended without smiling once, my mother hugged me and whispered, "I hope you know what you're doing." Not congratulations. Not I'm proud of you. Just a recorded concern, something she could point to later, evidence that she had warned me. My father Warren shook Daniel's hand and said, "Take care of her." He meant it kindly. He said nothing else for the rest of the reception. That was 17 months before that Sunday at Grace Fellowship. And in those 17 months, my mother had developed a pattern. She called every Sunday at 7:15 p.m. The calls would begin the same way: "How are you? How is the house? Have you seen the rain we've been getting?" And then, around the 10-minute mark, she would find her way to Daniel or Lily. She never asked about them directly. She asked around them, the way you circle something you don't want to touch. Is it hard? Raising someone else's child? As though Lily were a task. Does she talk about her mother a lot? The word her carrying just enough weight to remind me that Claire had existed, that my position was secondary. Daniel seemed tired at the gas station, Nora. I saw him. He looked tired. I answered the same way each time. Evenly. Briefly. Then I got off the phone and went back to my life. My life, which she was entirely unaware of. I had started a table for 9 months before I met Daniel, before the grief support group, before the coffee at the diner, before any of it. It had begun as what most of these things begin as, a way to process something too large to hold any other way. My brother Marcus had just died, and I was a lifestyle blogger with 40,000 followers and nothing to say that didn't feel hollow. So one evening I picked up my camera and I talked. About loss. About sitting at a table that used to seat 3 and now seated 1. About making a meal for someone who wasn't there anymore. That video got 3 million views in 4 days. I uploaded another. Then another. I started talking about grief, about blended families, about what it means to love people who are still learning to love you back. About step-parenting. About the specific, quiet courage it takes to show up in someone else's story when your own heart is still cracked open. By the time I married Daniel, the channel had 4 million subscribers. By our first wedding anniversary, it had 1 million. I had a creative director, Donna, and a production team of 3. I had a partnership with a kitchenware brand that paid $480,000 a year for 4 integrated posts. I had a book deal. Daniel had renovated the back bedroom into a studio over a weekend, quietly and precisely, the way he does everything. He had built me a place to work without ever once suggesting it was less than real work. My mother knew I did videos. She called it Nora's Little Channel. She had never searched for it. Never asked how many people watched. Never asked what it paid. I hadn't told her. Not out of secrecy, out of experience. She would have found a way to make it small, and I was done offering her things she could make small. The worst of the escalation came 2 months before Lily's first communion. Sunday 7:15, like clockwork. We talked about the weather and Becca's new marble countertops, which my mother mentioned were extraordinary. Nora, you really should see them. Then the turn, on schedule. I heard Daniel's taking Lily to Claire's parents for Thanksgiving. He is. We are. We go every year. A pause. You spend Thanksgiving with his late wife's family. They're Lily's grandparents. Nora. The patient tone arrived. Don't you think for your sake, don't you think it's time Daniel helped Lily move forward? Spending every holiday with that woman's parents isn't moving forward. That woman. I let the phrase sit in the air between us. Her name was Claire, I said. And those people are Lily's family. And what are you? I'm also her family. My mother exhaled. I just don't understand why you keep putting yourself in second place. You're too good for second place, Nora. She believed that was a compliment. She had no capacity to understand that in trying to remove me from second place, she was asking me to remove Lily from people who loved her, and Daniel from a grief he was entitled to carry at his own pace. I got off the phone and went to the kitchen. Lily was doing homework at the table, tongue between her teeth, pressing hard on her pencil. Can you help me spell Mediterranean? She asked without looking up. I spelled it. She wrote it letter by letter. Then she looked up. Nora. Are you okay? I looked at her, 7 years old, pencil in hand, homework spread across the table that used to only seat one. Yeah, baby. I'm okay. She went back to her work. I made tea. And I sat with a quiet certainty I hadn't had before. Something was coming. Some moment when the truth and the lie would end up in the same room, and I was going to have to decide whether to let them meet or look away. I didn't know, that evening, that the room would be a church. That the lie would be spoken into a microphone. That the truth would be watched by 11 million people who already knew my face. Lily received her first communion on the first Sunday of December. She had asked, with the specific gravity that children bring to the things they've thought about carefully, to take it at Grace Fellowship, the church where her mother had been baptized as a girl. Claire's family had moved away years ago, but the records were still there. The stained glass was still the same. Lily had seen a photograph of it once, in an album at her grandmother's house, and she had asked if she could go there. Just once. Daniel had spoken to Pastor Gerald Whitmore. Pastor Whitmore had agreed immediately and warmly, the way good pastors do. My mother, upon hearing that Lily's first communion would be at her church, had taken it as an invitation to orchestrate. She arranged the reception in the fellowship hall. She ordered the cake, white fondant, small crosses in pale blue. She coordinated with Mrs. Patterson on the table centerpieces. She called the women's ministry and arranged for petit fours. She made herself the center of it. She was very good at that. What no one had checked, what my mother certainly hadn't thought to verify, was that the church's new livestream system would be active that Sunday. It had been installed to broadcast services to homebound members. It was mounted above the altar, a fixed wide-angle lens with a clear view of the entire sanctuary. The church secretary had switched it on at 10:30 that morning and forgotten to note in the program that the service was being broadcast. By 10:47 a.m., the stream was live. By 11:04 a.m., someone who recognized the sanctuary had typed in the comments, "Wait, isn't this Grace Fellowship in Dayton?" Isn't Nora from A Table for Three from Dayton? By 11:11 a.m., the concurrent viewership had reached 340,000. None of us knew any of this yet. At 11:23 a.m., the communion had just ended. Lily had been perfect, solemn and careful, holding the small piece of bread in both palms the way Pastor Whitmore had shown her face so concentrated that I had to look at the stained glass for a moment to keep myself together. Daniel had his arm around me. He squeezed once, quietly. Then the communion was over. There was a brief pause before the procession to the fellowship hall. And my mother rose from the front pew and walked to the pulpit as though she had been scheduled. She hadn't been. She tapped the microphone once. The sound moved through the church and through the livestream system and into the earphones of 340,000 people who were about to become a great deal more. "I just want to say a few words," she began, warm and certain, the voice of a woman who had stood at microphones her entire life, about this beautiful day. And about family. And about what it really means to build one. Lily stopped swinging her shoes. She sensed, the way children sense things, that the room had changed. My mother looked at me. A quick look, a measurement. "Some of us worry," she said, "when the people we love make choices that seem complicated." She paused the way she always paused, for effect, for the room to lean in. "When they choose to take on someone else's burdens. Someone else's child. Someone else's grief. Instead of building something clean and whole from the beginning." I didn't move. "My daughter Nora is here today." She smiled toward me, a public smile, a performing smile, a smile that had nothing behind it. "She has a good heart. She always has. But a good heart doesn't always make a good decision, and a mother's job, even when the child is grown, is to tell the truth." 300 people in Grace Fellowship Church were very still. On the live stream, the concurrent viewership had just crossed 800,000. And in my pocket, my phone was vibrating, once, twice, then continuously, the way it does when something has started that I don't yet know about. Donna. Donna's name on the screen over and over, the way she only calls when something is urgent. I didn't answer. Not yet. My mother was still talking. And I was watching her, really watching her, the way she held the microphone like she owned it, the way her voice carried that particular warmth that sounded like love and functioned like control, and something settled in me that had been unsettled for a very long time. Not rage. Not grief. Something quieter than both. Clarity. My mother had been speaking for 4 minutes when I felt Lily's hand find mine. She didn't look up at me. She kept her eyes forward, her patent leather shoes still now, her small fingers laced through mine with the quiet precision of someone who had decided to hold on. I don't know what she understood about what was being said from the pulpit. But she understood enough to reach for my hand, and that single small action, steadied me in a way nothing else could have. Daniel was on my other side. His jaw was tight. He hadn't moved, but I could feel the tension radiating off him the way heat rises from pavement, contained, controlled, the stillness of a man deciding very carefully what he is and is not going to do. My mother was reaching the end of her remarks. I could tell by the way her voice softened, the way it always softens when she is landing a point she wants people to carry home with them. "I believe in this family," she said, gesturing toward the pew where we sat, Lily, Daniel, me, like a display she was presenting to the room. "I believe in Daniel and in this beautiful little girl. And I believe that my daughter loves them in her way." A pause. "I just hope, in time, that love grows into wisdom. Because some things, no matter how much we want them to be, simply cannot be made whole." She stepped back from the microphone. 300 people did not clap. A few tried, a soft, uncertain scattering of palms, and then stopped, sensing correctly that applause was the wrong response to something that had not been quite a blessing. Pastor Whitmore moved toward the pulpit with the careful urgency of a man who has just watched a social grenade roll across the floor of his sanctuary. "Thank you, Patricia. Let us all move now toward the fellowship hall, where," my phone vibrated again. I looked down. Donna. 11 missed calls. And a text that read, Nora. The stream is live. 2am watching right now. Your mom is going viral. Call me immediately. I read it twice. Then I turned the phone face down on my knee. Around me, the congregation was beginning to rise, gathering handbags and programs, shifting toward the aisle with the polite relief of people who want to leave a room without acknowledging why. I heard my name said twice, once by my Aunt Carol in the row behind me, once by someone I didn't recognize near the side door. My mother had descended from the pulpit and was accepting a hug from Mrs. Patterson, who said something low and affirming that I couldn't hear. My mother nodded. She had the expression of someone who has performed a difficult but necessary duty. Lily tugged my hand. Nora. Are we going for cake now? I looked at her face. Cake was still cake. The world, for her, had not yet reorganized itself around what had just happened. That was something I wanted to preserve for as long as possible. Yes, I said. We're going for cake. Daniel leaned close to my ear. Are you all right? Give me 1 minute. I slipped out of the pew and into the side corridor, the one that runs behind the sanctuary toward the church offices. I dialed Donna. She picked up before the first ring had finished. Nora. Listen to me carefully. The church livestream has been running since 10:30. Someone in the comments recognized Grace Fellowship and tagged your channel. Right now there are 1.4 million people watching your mother's speech live. The clip of her saying, "cannot be made whole," has already been clipped and posted 3 times. One of those clips has 200,000 views. The comments are, Nora, the comments are extraordinary. I leaned against the corridor wall. The wallpaper was pale blue with a very small fleur-de-lis pattern. I stared at it. Are they there with you? Completely. Some of them are angry. Some of them are crying. 3 people have posted that they are stepparents and they are sobbing. Your inbox has 4,000 new messages in the last 45 minutes. A breath. Nora. What do you want to do? What did I want to do? I thought about every Sunday call at 7:15. Every careful, warm-voiced verdict. A grieving man is not a husband, he's a project. Some things cannot be made whole. 3 years of it, 3 years of swallowing the words and getting off the phone and going back to my life, protecting my family from a version of my mother I had been quietly carrying alone. I thought about Lily's hand in mine. About Daniel's jaw, tight and controlled in the pew. I thought about the book on my desk, the one I had spent 14 months writing, about grief and love and the particular kind of courage required to build a family out of broken things. The one my editor had called the most important thing I'd written. The one due to my publisher in 6 weeks. I thought about 11 million people who had, for 3 years, watched me talk about exactly this. Who had written to me in the thousands, Nora, I am a step-parent and no one tells you how hard it is. Nora, I lost someone and I didn't think I could love again. Nora, your channel is the reason I didn't give up. I had spent 3 years being honest with strangers about the most difficult things in my life. I had never once been honest with my mother about the life she was dismissing. Donna, I said. Is the stream still live? Yes. Where is the camera positioned? Fixed wide angle above the altar. If you stand at the pulpit, you're dead center in the frame. A long pause. Don't do anything yet, I said. But don't let anyone turn it off. I put the phone in my pocket and walked back into the sanctuary. Most of the congregation had filtered out. A few clusters remained near the doors. My mother was still near the front, speaking with Pastor Whitmore, her back to the altar. Daniel stood at the end of our pew, Lily beside him, watching me come back down the aisle with the steady, careful attention he gives everything. I stopped at the base of the pulpit steps. 3 steps. I had climbed steeper ones. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. I want to tell you what I was thinking as I climbed those steps, Because it was not what you might expect. I was not thinking about vindication. I was not thinking about the 1,000,000 people watching. I was not thinking about my mother's face when she turned around and saw me standing where she had just stood. I was thinking about Lily. I was thinking about the fact that she had held my hand. That she was 7 years old and had, without being asked, decided that holding my hand was the right thing to do. And I thought, if she can do that, if a child who has already lost the most important person in her world can reach across the space between us and choose to hold on, then the least I can do is stand up and tell the truth. Not for the stream. Not for my channel. Not even for myself. For her. For Daniel. For every step-parent who had written to me at midnight saying I feel invisible in my own family and meant it in a way that no one else could quite understand. I reached the pulpit. I adjusted the microphone. It was set for my mother's height, a few inches below mine. I heard the small feedback whine of the adjustment and watched the remaining people in the sanctuary turn toward the sound. My mother turned. Her expression cycled through 3 things in less than a second: surprise, then recognition, then something harder and more careful that I had only seen on her face a handful of times, the look of a woman who has just realized the situation is no longer under her control. I did not look at her. I looked at the room. "I'm sorry to keep everyone a moment," I said. My voice was level. It was the voice I use when I'm recording, not performed, not elevated, just clear and unhurried. "I want to say something before we go into the fellowship hall, and I promise it won't take long." No one moved toward the doors. Daniel took a step forward, instinctively. I met his eyes. He stopped. He understood, in the way he always understands without being told, this was mine to do. "My mother loves me," I said. "I want to start there, because I believe it's true. She loves me in the way that people love things they are frightened for. And she has been frightened for me since I married Daniel." The room was very still. "She's frightened because our family is complicated. Because Daniel was married before me and his wife died and her name was Claire and she was a real person who mattered and who is still present in this family every single day, in the way Lily laughs, in the photographs on our hallway wall, in the yellow dress Lily chose to wear today because yellow was her mother's favorite color." I heard a sound from somewhere in the remaining congregation. A soft, involuntary sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a sigh. "My mother said today that some things cannot be made whole." I paused. Let that sit. And she's right. Our family will never be the shape that it was before Claire died. There is a space in it that no one fills, and no one is trying to. Lily is not looking for a replacement mother. Daniel is not looking for a replacement wife. And I am not here to replace anyone. My mother had not moved. She was standing 15 feet from me, perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her face unreadable from where I stood except for the 2 points of high color in her cheeks. "What I am," I said, "is the person who makes Lily's lunch every morning and checks her homework and sits with her when she has nightmares and held her hand in the 3rd pew today. That's what I am. Not a replacement. Not a project. Not a complication in someone else's story. A breath. I am her family. And she is mine." Lily, standing beside Daniel at the end of the pew, had gone very straight. She was watching me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, not the careful watchfulness, not the little girl gravity. Something younger and more open than both. Something that looked, if I had to name it, like relief. "Mom," I said, and I finally looked at her, directly, without apology. "I know you mean well. I know that's true. But meaning well and doing well are different things, and what you said today, from this pulpit, at this microphone, at your granddaughter's first communion, caused harm. Not just to me. To Daniel. And to Lily." My mother opened her mouth. "I'm not finished," I said. Quietly. Not a shout, not even close. Just a sentence that closed a door. She closed her mouth. "There is something I haven't told you," I said. I haven't told you because every time I've tried to share something from my life that I'm proud of, you found a way to make it smaller. So I stopped trying. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. I turned it so the back camera faced the fixed camera above the altar, not dramatically, just clearly, and I opened a table for 3. I have a channel, I said. It's called A Table for 3. I started it when Marcus died because I didn't know what else to do with the grief. I talked about loss, and then I talked about love, and then I talked about what it looks like to build a family out of broken pieces. I set the phone on the pulpit ledge. It has 11.2 million subscribers. It earned $480,000 last year from a single brand partnership. I have a book coming out in 6 weeks. It is, in every measurable sense, a real job. I heard a sharp inhale from somewhere near the back wall. My Aunt Carol. The reason I'm telling you this now, I said, is not to embarrass you. It's because this service has been live-streamed since 10:30 this morning, and right now there are 1.4 million people watching this conversation. People who have been watching my channel for 3 years. People who wrote to me after their own losses, after their own stepfamilies told them they didn't belong. People who already know every story I've just told you, every piece of it, because I told it to them honestly, even when I couldn't tell it to you. The silence in the church was total now. Not the polite silence of before. The real kind, the kind that happens when a room full of people all stop breathing at the same time. My mother's face had gone from unreadable to something that was not quite any emotion I had a name for. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was something in between, the expression of a person watching a structure they believed was solid turn out to be glass. I'm not here to humiliate you, I said. And I meant it with my whole heart. I'm here because Lily deserves to be in a room where the family around her is honest. Because she has already had enough people tell her that her family doesn't look the way a family is supposed to look. She doesn't need one more. I stepped back from the microphone. 1 step. I did not move to leave. I just stopped talking and let the silence do what silence does. Pastor Whitmore was standing near the side door with his hand pressed flat against the wall, as though steadying himself. Mrs. Patterson had set down her cake box. My Aunt Carol was sitting back down in the pew she had almost exited, slowly, like someone whose legs had stopped cooperating. My mother stood. For a very long time, 10 seconds that felt like something else entirely, she just stood. And then she did something I had not expected. She did not launch into defense. She did not reach for anger. She looked at Lily. Just looked at her, this 7-year-old in a yellow dress with uneven braids who was watching her grandmother with the wide, clear, patient eyes of someone who has already learned how to wait for the world to make sense. Whatever my mother saw in that look, I don't know. I can only tell you that something moved in her face, not a performance, not a calibration, something genuine and painful that I hadn't seen there before. She didn't say anything. She walked to the end of our pew, sat down beside Lily, and put her arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. And Lily, because she is who she is, leaned into her. I came down from the pulpit. Daniel was 3 feet away. He took my hand when I reached him, not dramatically, not with any declaration. He just took my hand, and we walked together toward the fellowship hall. The concurrent viewership on the stream at that moment, according to Donna's later debrief, was 2.1 million. By the time we reached the cake table, it was 3.7. By midnight, the full video had been uploaded by Grace Fellowship's official account. Someone on their tech team had clipped and captioned the entire service, and it had 8.4 million views. By the following Thursday, it had 11 million, a number that was, Donna noted with the particular dry humor she reserves for extraordinary occasions, exactly equal to my subscriber count. The internet has decided, she said on the phone that Thursday evening, that you are the protagonist. I was always the protagonist, I said. My mother just had the microphone. The fallout came in pieces. That's the only honest way to describe it, not a single explosion, but a series of smaller detonations spreading outward through the days that followed, each one revealing something the previous one had left hidden. Tuesday morning. My publisher called before 9 a.m. Meredith Chen, who has been in publishing for 31 years and maintains at all times the composed warmth of someone who has seen everything, was barely composed. Nora. I have watched that video 4 times. My assistant has watched it 12. We are moving the book release up 3 months. We are reprinting the first run. And I need you to write a foreword, just 2 pages, something honest, that speaks to what that day was about. Can you do that? Yes, I said. I can do that. Tuesday afternoon. 3 emails arrived from the brand partnership team, each with the subject line some variation of the words following up. The kitchenware company wanted to extend the partnership through the following year. A second brand, a children's clothing line, one I had quietly admired for some time, had sent an exploratory inquiry. The third email was from a production company in Los Angeles who wanted to discuss, as they put it, the possibility of a television format. I forwarded all 3 to Donna. She called me back in 8 minutes to say, with barely restrained delight, that she was going to need a bigger spreadsheet. Wednesday. My Aunt Carol came to the house. I hadn't called her. She simply appeared at 10 a.m., carrying a container of her date and walnut cake, the kind she makes for funerals and for events she considers equally serious, and she stood on my porch with the expression of a woman who has been composing what she wants to say for 2 days. I should have said something on Sunday, she told me at the kitchen table. When your mother stood up. I saw her go to that pulpit and I thought, Patricia, don't. But I didn't say it out loud. I should have. You're saying it now, I told her. That's not the same thing. No, I agreed. But it counts. She was quiet for a moment. Then, 11 million, Nora. I watched 6 videos last night. I cried at 3 of them. A pause. Why didn't you tell us? I thought about how to answer that honestly. Because telling you would have meant waiting to see how you'd receive it. And I was tired of waiting. Carol nodded slowly. She cut 2 pieces of cake. We ate in the kitchen and talked about Marcus, which we hadn't done in months, and she told me she remembered the first video I made, the one about the table that used to seat 3, because someone at her book club had shared it and she had watched it without knowing it was me until a minute in. She had cried and then called her book club friend and said, "That's my niece," in a voice that apparently made the whole room cry all over again. I was so proud, she said. I just didn't know you needed me to say so. I hadn't known either, until she said it. Thursday. The Grace Fellowship Church Board met. I was not present, but Pastor Whitmore called Daniel, who had known him since Claire's funeral, and summarized the conversation with pastoral care and remarkable directness. The board had reviewed the video. They had reviewed the comments section, which by Thursday contained over 400,000 responses. They had noted, in particular, the comments from viewers who identified themselves as members of Grace Fellowship, some of whom had attended Sunday services for decades. The board asked my mother to step back from her role coordinating the women's ministry retreat scheduled for March. It was not a punishment, Pastor Whitmore said carefully. It was an opportunity for reflection, and for some conversations that should have happened privately before they happened publicly. My mother told him, according to Daniel's careful retelling, that she understood. Thursday evening. My father called. Warren Ferris does not, as a general rule, call. He communicates through my mother, through her reporting of what he thinks, what he noticed, what concerned him. Direct calls from my father are rare enough that when his name appeared on my screen, I sat down before I answered. Nora. His voice was the same as always, measured, spare, a voice that spends most of its words on practical matters and leaves the rest unsaid. Hi, Dad. A pause. Then, I watched it. The whole thing. Twice. Another pause, longer. That thing you do. The channel. 11 million. Yes. Your brother would have been something else, he said. And I understood, not as a deflection, but as the highest compliment my father knew how to pay. Marcus had been the one he talked about with unchecked pride. Naming him here, in this context, was my father's way of placing me beside him. He would have, I agreed. Your mother. He stopped. Started again. She isn't wrong that she worries. But she said it wrong. She's known that since Sunday night. A breath. I thought you should hear that from me. It was not an apology, not from him, and not really on her behalf. But it was the closest my father has ever come to acknowledging, out loud, that something in our family had been handled incorrectly. From Warren Ferris, that was a seismic event. Thank you, Dad, I said. You're all right? He asked. Practical. Direct. I'm all right. Good, he said. And that was the end of the call, 3 minutes and 40 seconds, which is, I later realized, the longest phone call my father and I had ever had. Friday morning. I was at my desk in the studio when Lily came in from school. She dropped her backpack in the doorway, she always drops it in the doorway, never past it, and came to stand beside my chair. She looked at the screen, then at me. Mia's mom showed her the video, she said. And? Mia said you were very brave. She thought about it. I think you were brave too. But also I think you were just, normal. Like. You just said the true things. I swiveled my chair to face her. Is that what it seemed like? Lily considered this with the seriousness she brings to considered questions. Yeah. Like when I told Mrs. Benedetti that Marcus Chen was copying off my spelling test. I was scared to say it, but I still said it because it was true. She picked up a marker from my desk, examined it, put it back. You were just bigger scared. Bigger scared, I repeated. That's exactly what it was. She nodded, satisfied. Then, Nora. Is Grandma Patricia going to be different now? I looked at her. 7 years old and asking the precise right question. I don't know yet, I said. People take different amounts of time to change. My dad says the important thing is whether they're trying. Your dad is very smart. I know, she said simply, and went to get a snack. Saturday afternoon. My mother rang the doorbell at 2:17 p.m. I saw her through the hallway window before I opened the door, standing on the porch, no handbag, no organized presentation, no Sunday best composure. She was wearing a coat I hadn't seen before, a plain gray wool, and she looked like someone who had spent several days without her usual armor and was not entirely sure what she looked like without it. I opened the door. I'm not here to fight, she said immediately. As though she needed to establish the terms before I could change them. I'm not here to explain myself. I need to come in. I stepped back from the door. She walked in and stopped in the hallway. She looked at the photographs on the wall, the ones I had arranged when we moved in, a mix of all of us, Daniel and me, Lily at the beach, Marcus and me from a hiking trip 3 years before he died, and 2 photographs of Claire, one from her wedding day, one from a vacation Daniel had described as the best week of his life. Both in plain frames, eye level, equal to everything else on that wall. My mother stood in front of Claire's wedding photograph for a long time. I waited. She was beautiful, she said finally. She was. Another silence. Then my mother turned to me and the careful composure, the managed, performed composure I had watched her maintain my entire life, was not there. What was there instead was something older and more tired, and more genuinely her than anything I had seen from her in years. I didn't know, she said. About the channel. About how, I didn't understand what it was. A breath. I watched all 3 years of it. Thursday night, through Friday. All of it. Her voice was not steady. You talked about Marcus. Nora, you talked about him in a way that I couldn't even, she stopped. Pressed her lips together. Why couldn't you talk to me like that? Because you weren't ready to listen, I said. Not harshly. Just honestly. And I didn't know how to make you ready. She sat down on the bench in the hallway, just sat down, uninvited, the way people sit when their legs have quietly given up. She put her hands on her knees. She was quiet for long enough that I thought she might be done, and then she said, "I told 300 people your marriage was a mistake." Yes. And 1.4 million strangers. Yes. And then 11 million. Yes. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked at me with something that was not quite my mother, or rather, was my mother beneath all the things my mother usually was. Beneath the management and the warmth as control and the Sunday calls and the careful verdicts. A woman who had watched herself from the outside for 5 days and was not pleased with what she saw. "I owe you an apology," she said. "And Daniel. And Lily." She said it plainly, without softening it into an explanation or qualifying it into something smaller. "I'm not going to tell you I meant well because you know I meant well and it doesn't matter. Meaning well and doing right are not the same thing. You said that on Sunday and you were right." I had said exactly that. "I know," I said. "I'm going to need time," she said. "To figure out, to understand the difference between worrying about you and controlling you. I know those have looked the same." "I know I haven't," she stopped. "Tried again. I haven't seen Daniel's family the way I should have. Or Lily." At which point Lily appeared at the end of the hallway, home from Mia's house, backpack over one shoulder, Mia's orange cat still leaving fur on her sleeve. She saw her grandmother on the bench and stopped. My mother looked at her. "Hi, Grandma Patricia," Lily said carefully. My mother opened her arms. And Lily, who holds grudges far less than anyone I have ever known, walked down the hallway and let herself be hugged. My mother held her for a long time, the way you hold someone when you understand, perhaps for the first time, what you almost let slip. I stood in the hallway of my own house and watched my mother hold my stepdaughter and thought, this is what it looks like. Not the clean hole my mother once said was the only thing worth having. The other kind. The built kind. The kind assembled carefully out of broken pieces by people who were willing to stay. It doesn't look perfect. It looks real. The book came out on a Tuesday in March. By Friday it was #1. Not in a subcategory, #1, the list, the one that matters. Meredith called at 8 a.m. and said only, "Nora." I said, "I know." We stayed on the line for a moment without speaking, which is the publishing equivalent of a standing ovation. I dedicated it to 3 people. Daniel, for choosing to stay open. Lily, for teaching me what family actually looks like. And Marcus, for the table that used to seat 3, and the grief that started everything. My mother bought 12 copies. I know because my Aunt Carol told me, and because my mother is not a subtle woman. She gave them to her book club, to the women's ministry, to Mrs. Patterson, who had witnessed everything and said nothing and has since, according to Carol, become one of the channel's most devoted viewers. My mother and I speak on the phone now. Still on Sundays, some patterns run too deep to fully uproot, but the calls are different. She asks about Lily's school projects. She asks about Daniel's current renovation, which is our back porch, which he has been building with the patient precision of a man who believes a good porch is worth taking seriously. She does not offer verdicts. She asks questions and she waits for the answers, which is a different thing entirely, and which, I have learned, is actually very hard for her. I give her credit for doing it anyway. What I know now, that I couldn't have known before Sunday in that church, is that the people who love you imperfectly are not your enemies. They are just people who haven't yet learned to love you in the shape that you actually are. Some of them never will. Some of them, given time and a reason they cannot argue with, will try. My mother is trying. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Last week, Lily asked me if she could call me Mom. I told her she could call me whatever felt true. She thought about it for 2 full days, the way she thinks about things that matter, and on Thursday morning at breakfast, she looked up from her cereal and said, "Nora, Mom. Because you're both." I am both. I am Nora and I am hers and I am standing at a table that once seated one and now seats three and will, if I have anything to say about it, keep adding chairs for as long as there are people worth pulling close. That is the whole story. The version my mother didn't plan to tell. The version 11 million strangers heard before my own family did. I don't regret a word of it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.